This open session meeting to order at 11:30, and would ask that you join me in a moment of silent reflection. So if anyone has any pecuniary interest to declare, seeing none, rise and report motions of the in-camera session. Is there any to report, Mr. Cribbs?
Nothing at this time. Thank you, Warden.
Thank you. Okay, item 7 then, I'm going to turn this portion of the meeting over to our treasurer, John Innes, to introduce and review the meeting's process, please. And then I guess you can move into the budget setting process explanation. Thanks.
Thank you, Warden. First of all, before I talk about the county's budget this morning, I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about the report that you find in front of you with regards to the OMPF funding for the 2016 calendar year. For the past 2 years, I have, and a number of your staff across the county, along with other parties, have been working with the province to provide input in the setting of the allocations for each year that comes up. The one thing that we have not been able to do is to get more money put into the program. There was an agreement reached approximately 5 years ago that said that the province was going to ratchet down the overall OMPF funding pool to $500 million. Last year it was at 550, or for the current year it was at 515. It went to 500,000 for this year. There was a $5 million bump, but that went exclusively to northern municipalities, and that was announced in the budget as well. So the net reduction was $15 million everywhere except for the north, which got a slight increase. So we've been faced with the fact that there was going to be a reduction in the funding that was provided, and the question was, how should the province allocate that? There were two things that happened during those discussions this year that we believe have softened the blow from what it would have been for the majority of you, because again, there are 6 out of all the 11 area municipalities who receive transitional assistance, and if you receive transitional assistance, then your funding went down this year, period, and it went down the maximum amount. The key to it was that last year, the minimum guarantee that you had was 80% of your prior year's grant. This year, the province saw fit, after the urging from a number of municipalities, to increase that minimum from 80% to 85%. So that did limit the downward trend or the downward impact of the reduction in funding that you see before you here today. The second thing that we did was that we convinced the province that it should modify its allocation methodology to provide an enhancement for municipalities that have a significant amount of their area in the form of farmland. So what the province did was they added $5 million to the rural grant, and they came up with a new formula that said if the amount of farmland in your community exceeded 70%, that you would receive on an increasing scale a bump to the amount of funding that you have received. Because of that, when you look for the rural municipalities, when you look at the grant portion, not the overall funding from OMPF, but the grant portion, there's a column that specifically states grant, you will see that your funding has increased in 2016 compared to 2015 and 2014, in which the amount of that funding was essentially flat. And the reason for that was that new grant that we were able to put in. So what that means is that instead of, for those of you who are in the rural, and this is in general across the county, instead of in excess of 1/3 of your funding coming from transitional assistance, The portion that comes from transitional assistance is now less than a quarter of that, so less than 25%. What that means is that now that we have reached the floor that the province wants, and the discussions going forward will be with regards to how to redistribute the $61 million that currently forms the transitional assistance pool, that we have an opportunity now to ensure that you will get more of the money as it gets redistributed into the program. Because what the province intends to do, we believe, although they have not made a final decision on that, is to take that $61 million, redistribute that into the program so that everybody is going to get their funding through the grant portion instead of the transitional assistance. So again, I wish that I could say that everybody had more money this year. You do not. I can tell you that you have, if you received transitional assistance, you went down approximately 15%. There was nothing that could be done about that. But we have made sure that going forward, now that you are at the minimum, so to speak, that there should be an opportunity to enhance and make sure that you end up with more cash from this program than you would have otherwise.
Councillor Case.
Yeah, I just, through you, Madam Warden, to Mr. Ennis, I do want to thank Mr. Ennis for his efforts. He has been working very hard in supporting the lower tier for quite some time on this issue. But at the same time, it still makes me ill. What this does to my municipality, it's basically is an 8 to 9% tax increase across the board. This is what this number does to us. So again, we've been dealing with this now since 2012, and here we go again. So we've lost about $600,000 and change worth of funding since 2012. We've been very quick to get out of the gate as a municipality, as a lot of municipalities have been, to lobby. But again, at the end of the day, this represents between 8 and 9% tax increase to my municipality, and it's absolutely asinine, in my opinion. Again, this formula is the new math plus the new math plus the new math. But again, at the same time, I do want to thank Mr. Ennis for his efforts, because without the work that he's done on this file, to be very honest with you, we probably would have been looking at a lot more. So again, I thank Mr. Ennis, but at the same time, can't say enough how disappointed I really am with the province on this deal. It really is hurting the agricultural rural municipalities in a very big way. Thank you.
To follow up.
Thank you, Madam Warden. The one thing that I did not mention is that the deal that was brokered by AMO, which resulted in the reduction to $500,000, is basically expires, and that is up for renewal and renegotiation this coming year. So again, I would say to all of you that use your influence in that body to let them know what you're looking for, because there is an opportunity now, and they will be vocal and they will want to participate in that.
Case.
Well, yes, and just another comment, if I could, Madam Warden, through you, back to Mr. Ennis. Again, not directed at Mr. Ennis, but the province saw fit to give a bump of $5 million to the northern part of Ontario. To be very honest with you, I think the province needs to look at the province as a whole. And when you talk about rural municipalities, they have to treat them fairly, and I don't think that's happened. So again, I understand that a $5 million bump went to the northern rural municipalities, good for them. But at the same time, I think the province has to take a real hard look at the rural agricultural municipalities throughout the province and treat them equally next time around. So again, just my comment, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Case. Mr. Ennis, would you like to continue then?
Thank you. If there are no other questions with regards to the OMPF, and by the way, I will be emailing a copy of this document and the attachments to all of your area treasurers, or the treasurers of your municipalities, this afternoon. I wanted to make sure you had it first. Talking about the process that is before you today. What we have done is, in addition to all the matters that you referred to this specific meeting, we as your staff also went through and identified all of the reports that normally come forward to you at various times leading up to the budget, and completed them to the extent that it was possible. You will note in several of them we talk about the fact that we will have to do updates at some point in time between now and March, and put them all together on the agenda. So you have all of the information in one spot before you today. We have also gone through and tried to give you background information to let you know what the history is with regards to how the budgets are formed at the county, what staff's mandate and objectives have been over the past number of years, what the outcomes have been. I mean, to me, it is significant that through the efforts of staff and through yourselves, that the increase in the tax rate over the last 8 years has been essentially at the rate of inflation and nothing more, which means that we are not, in terms of real dollars, taking any more out of the pockets of people now than we were 9 years ago. It's not very many organizations that can make that comment because, quite frankly, the county is not immune to inflation. As the prices that you pay, and you pay at your municipalities and our ratepayers pay increase, they do to us as well, sometimes even more so. But the key here is the fact that we've tried to give you a lot of information to let you know what is, what the context and set the case for your discussions today. We've also provided you with a copy of the schedule for the budget sessions going forward. Again, for the councillors who've been here for many years, I don't think there's anything new there, but it never hurts to make sure that we have the schedule in front of us and remember what those dates are. Finally, there are a number of reports here that do require you to take some action on them today. Specifically, there is the report with regards to the funding of non-cash expenses, which is a statutory report. You are obligated by provincial legislation to deal with that prior to the budget. The second report that we were hoping to see some good debate and some direction coming from today is with regards to the 10-year capital plan that Housing presented to you at the beginning of the summer. This is crucial for us going forward because everything that, or the whole budget for that department, everything other than, well, quite frankly, all of its expenditures, are going to be influenced and impacted by the decision you make with regards to that program. So we hope that we have provided you with enough information to make a decision with regards to that. It would be very beneficial to us if you can provide us the direction of what you want to do. Otherwise, this is a regular council meeting. It means that you can make motions in the way that you normally do. You can table things if you feel that is appropriate. You can refer things on to the next budget session if you wish. But the opportunity and the idea behind here was to make sure that everybody had an opportunity to get the information, to contextualize and start thinking in terms of what it is we should be setting as the objective for the county as we set our budget for 2016 going forward.
Councillor Case.
Just one point I'd like to confirm with Mr. Ennis. Is this the year that SLEP comes back to County Council for money, or was that last year? My memory's a little foggy on that one.
Their contract was up last year and was renewed last year. So that's the base funding. Again, you as council ultimately have the authority to do what you want to do. But no, they are not coming for additional funding this year or for renewal of the funding agreement. We basically rolled that over and renewed that last year.
Follow-up, Councillor Case.
Yeah, and I just wanted to have that information. Was it a 2 or 3 year commitment or a 4 year commitment? I can't remember that we made. 4 year commitment? Thank you, Mr. Ennis.
Okay, Council, we have a bundle of items that fall out in the agenda from here, starting with item 8. These are all items that were ultimately referred to this special meeting for discussion. Item A deals with the SWIFT future funding. Should we have a discussion and then or an overview by staff and then council can ask questions? Mr. Ennis, do you want to answer to that then, please?
Thank you. I will start and then defer to Mr. Cribbs to add on top of that. The reason that this is before you today is that last year when this was presented to you, the decision was made to generally support the concept of moving forward with some form of an enhancement to the infrastructure for internet in the county. The funding request, which was for $200,000+ a year over 5 years, your decision for 2015 was that once the final decision was made that those funds would come out of the Opportunities and Contingencies Fund. You did not give specific directions for 2016 going forward. In your reports, there is a motion that indicated that you were reserving the opportunity to make a decision until such time as a business plan was made available by the SWIFT group, the working group under Western Wardens, who is spearheading this exercise. They are still waiting to confirm the levels of funding coming from the federal government and or the provincial government. Therefore, there is not a lot of information that has come forward right now, and staff are really not in a position to do more and to move this file forward. In Committee PM, there's a report going forward in which there is a request for a small amount of funds to be made available to continue supporting the work of that group in order to get the answers that you are looking for. But the reason this is here is A, you referred it to budget, and B, to make sure that you are aware of the fact that as it stands right now, the 2016 budget will be prepared without an allocation for the $200,000 into it, because you have not given us specific direction on that.
Any questions from Council? Councillor Napper?
You said that the afternoon committee is looking a commitment for $20,000. Is there a budget for that to come out of? Is there? Thank you.
Any further questions from Council? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item. Item 9? Or, no. Oh. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Innes. Mr. Innes advises me as chair that we should not leave this hanging, so we should refer it on to the next meeting to tidy this up. Councillor Case. Okay. Seconded by Councillor Bruzewitz. Discussion? Seeing none? All in favour? That motion is carried. Next is a report from our Social Services Division, item 9. Material is on pages 25 to 40, and who would like to speak to this? Maybe you, and followed by Ms. Rushhorn. Mr. Innes? Okay.
Thank you. I will start speaking with regards to the question of the financing package that was presented to you in the report. And then I will defer at that point in time to Mrs. Rushhorn, who will talk about the specifics of the plan and why it is necessary. In this report, if you will recall, we originally presented it to you with the concept that we would apply $1.5 million from the levy, essentially recognizing the fact that with the completion of the obligation to Blue Water Health, that there was those funds were available to do so. When the report was presented, there was some concern around the ring that that money had already been committed to the college and the grant over the next 6 years that you saw the agreement come forward at the last meeting. When we reviewed the minutes, what had happened was there was a lot of discussion about that, and I think that everybody around the ring had that in mind when they were considering the grant from the province. But there was no specific motion and no specific direction linking the 1.5 Blue Water Health monies to be used towards the college. Staff, when they were preparing the report, took the position that we have to look after our own responsibilities before we consider obligations outside of the county. And that was why we created the report saying that $1.5 million would be redirected towards addressing the obligation that we have to properly maintain social housing going forward. When this report came forward, Councillor Arnold moved an amendment. The amendment was that instead of all of the $1.5 million going towards this project, that some of it be applied towards the project. So what that means right now is the critical questions before you today are twofold. One, do you support the concept of trying to increase the spending on social housing, given the fact that the province and the federal government up till now have not come to the table to support us? And the second question then is, to what extent should we be doing this work? Should we be doing it on the basis of the $4 million that has been presented to you previously, or should it be at some lesser amount? And then the discussion at that point in time has to revolve around what the impact would be on the budget. So I wanted to make it clear that as far as the financing was concerned, that's where the basis in which the reports were prepared. With regards to the reasons why this spending is as important as it is, I will defer to Mrs. Rushorn to comment on that.
Through you, Warden, with regards to this plan, we have an aging social housing stock. We own 830 units across the portfolio, and those units are located across the county. The average age of those units is around 40 years. They're in need of some significant repair, and that's to maintain those housing stock. We've also addressed a need to look at the interior of our units as well. Once again, it's an aging stock. Where our tenants actually live needs to be upgraded as well to bring it up to more of a standard similar to what we're seeing at Maxwell Park Place, our new affordable housing projects. So this would allow us to maintain our existing assets in a good order so that we can continue to provide safe and affordable housing for our tenants. It's looking at an additional $3 million a year. Last year we had $1 million in capital in housing, so it's looking at an additional $3 million on an annual basis, as well as an additional $200,000 that would be needed in terms of offsetting some lost revenue, because if we're renovating apartments when they're empty, we would lose a little bit of revenue, as well as to assist with the project management and the management of that type of capital investment. So that we're really looking at a long-term strategy to deal with an aging portfolio.
Napper, McGugan, Gillis.
Thank you, Warden McDougall. And my question's through to Margaret. I heard you mention there that you're going to bring them up to the standard of Marshall Golan Place, is it? Maxwell Park? That's a pretty high standard building there compared to the marketplace that our social housing competes against. And I'm just wondering, does it have to go to that standard? That's a pretty high benchmark, and is there savings there to make a nice, decent place and save a few bucks?
When we looked at the unit interiors, and I said more of a standard, similar to what we had at Maxwell Park Place, but when we looked at it, what we assessed the unit interior renovations on was we've had a number of units that we've had to completely gut because of fire, that type of thing. So it cost us about $100 a square foot to bring them up to a newer standard. So it had fairly good quality kitchen cabinets, flooring, that type of thing. So, I mean, that's what I meant in terms of increasing the standard. So you're really renovating, bringing them up to a modern standard. We also would have to look at electrical and plumbing and that type of thing, abate any asbestos issues that we would have when you're looking at those types of renovations.
Madam Warden, members of County Council, through you to Margaret, is there legislation, or are we bound? Do we have to have the 730? Is there any way over the next 10 years that we can phase out of some of this? I'm sure that's not a very popular question, but we have to look at the long-term future of this organization called Lambton County.
I was just looking at Ms. Hall there in terms of the actual number, but yes, we have a legislative standard to maintain 751 units across the portfolio. It's in the social housing legislation.
You mean to tell me that the province tells you that we in Lambton County have to have 751 housing units and they contribute absolutely nothing? Is that right?
I'm going to actually refer that question to Ms. Hall, who is here.
Currently, we're receiving federal transfer payments. That is decreasing. Annual reports have gone to council, and by 2026, those payments will be down to zero. So currently, we do receive federal transfer payments. That has always been built in our budget.
How much is that?
For 2016, or you want to know what it's going to be for 2016, or what it is for 20? Can you hold on one moment so I can gather that information? For 2016, we will receive $800,740.
Councillor Gillis, and then Councillor Bruzewitz.
Thank you, Madam Warden. With regard to the standards that are in place, we understand that 40 years ago the building code was entirely different than what it is right now. So we have to meet the new building code, and not the new Canadian building code, which in itself is different as well, but the Ontario building code, correct? So in order to receive any funding, we have to do that. The other thing I wanted to clear in my own mind comes back to the grant that we gave out to Lambton College. It's supposed to start in 2016 and go out for 5 years, correct? Sorry, 6 years. And that we've already put that into play, correct? So looking at what we need to do at this point in time, you presented very well at committee PM, and I think we all understood exactly what we needed to do. But I also wanted to let everyone know that today I'm heading back to FCM in Ottawa, and this is being on the committee that I'm on, which is infrastructure. Social housing is one of the key things that we're talking about. And for those of you who are at FCM in Edmonton, you remember that this was front and center, and again, it's front and center. It's the #1 agenda that everyone across the country is talking about. So going forward, this is the one thing that we're going to continue to push, that we will be getting the funding that we need rather than the funding that they choose to give us. And all the provinces and territories are working on your behalf to get what we need. So I don't know if that's a bit of a ray of hope, but I would suggest that FCM and all the municipalities right across the country realize that 2026 we needed to address it, and the government that is in place right now has also made the promise in their platform that they would address it, and we are going to make sure that they do. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gillis. Councillor Bruzewitz, and then Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, Mayor Broad. In your assessment of the capital needs for the next 10 years, I'm pretty sure you see different degrees of urgency, and what I'm particularly interested is what's the scope of immediate urgency? Do we have some collapsible structure? Have we assessed it fairly well? That because those dangers do exist, I presume, especially if we did not maintain the properties, in a top shape. So is there any very near-term urgency, and if so, how much of those capital investments are really needed right away?
Ms. Rushorn?
We have, as a county, addressed any health and safety issues as they come up. So that is a critical priority for our department and for us as a corporation, that we would address any health and safety issues. So in terms of safety issues, we do address those. Do we have critical needs? Yes, we do. And what's happening is, as we get into projects, we identify that they're larger, because we do have an aging stock. Our balconies at Capella is a really good example of what we encounter. So that building is an older building. We were going to look at looking at an engineer coming in to assess those balconies, what was the need for the repair of those balconies, and come up with a strategy over 3 to 5 years for us to repair those balconies. The engineer recommended that we remove some of the loose concrete. On doing that, more and more balconies became more critical. We had to actually close down several of those balconies and do those emergency repairs. So that's the type of thing that we run into as we start into projects. And so now staff are recommending that we would take a look at the replacement of all of those balconies in 1 year, so that we have them all up to standard, that they're all safe. They are safe now. The engineer has indicated that they are safe, but that we don't continue to see a degradation in the value of that asset itself. It would cost us more in the long term if we continue to wait. So these are the types of things that we run into. This is a plan that would address capital needs that have been identified through a building consultant. So the consultant came in, identified the exteriors of the building, the systems of our buildings, made some assessments in terms of what was needed for the next 10 years. Staff have refined that through the assistance of finance and with their knowledge of our systems, and come up with this $40 million, which is an average of $4 million each year.
Again, so I have a full comfort in understanding. What you're telling me, and perhaps I misunderstood or do not understand properly, is that there's no identifiable structural problems requiring immediate attention at this time. Is that correct?
There's no health and safety issues right now, but we do have critical need to maintain our assets.
Thank you. I'm going to recognize Councillor Bradley, then Napper, then McKenzie, then Cook. I think I've seen all the hands.
I'm going to move the recommendation for Mr. Innes on page 31, and I'd like to speak to it if there's a seconder.
Seconded by Councillor Case.
And if I could speak to it, there's a lot of talk about the physical infrastructure, the deterioration of the physical infrastructure. What is even a greater issue is the disintegration and deterioration of the human infrastructure. And if you look at the 800 units, you will see, with a couple of exceptions, the newer building that Mayor Napper referred to, it's not acceptable, the level of maintenance. And this is not a criticism of working within the funds that are there. This is a plan over 10 years, and I hope more at the front end would give dignity back to people that live in social housing. And, you know, when we've talked about circles and dealing with social assistance and trying to move people from there to being tax receivers to taxpayers, there's two issues that usually crop up. One is transportation, and the other is housing. And the social housing units, in many cases across the county, need to be in much better shape. And people need to have, I mean, you need to dignify people when they're in circumstances often of not their own choosing, that they don't feel like they're second-class citizens. So I see this as a good plan over 10 years that will reinvest in the stock, and I do believe Councillor Gose is correct that there will be some more further spending on this. There was a really good article in the London Free Press yesterday about the success of co-op housing and other housing projects, nonprofit in London, and what they have done to enhance communities and at the same time enhance people. And this is just as much about enhancing people as it is about enhancing buildings. So I'm pleased with what's come back, and the only reason I suggest we need to, as Mr. Innes has indicated, if we wait till the budget session, we're too late into 2016 to do some of the things that need to be done. And I think we should celebrate this, that we are willing, using a combination of circumstances, to reinvest in not just homes and apartments and other physical things, but in people right across Lambton County, and celebrate it, not see it as taking castor oil and swallowing it. This is an opportunity over 10 years to renew what we own and what the people of this county own. So I'm certainly supportive of the direction that's been put forward by Mr. Innes.
Mr. Innes would like to make a comment, and then I'm going to go to Napper, McKenzie, Cook, and Case. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. Just a matter of clarification. The motion on page 31 was the original one. It indicates the full $1.5 million go towards this. I just wanted to confirm whether that was your intention in doing so, because that motion was actually amended to say a portion of that. So we need to be clear as to what it is we're actually saying. Are we doing the full $4 million? And if we are, that's fine, but we just want to make clear that know what we're talking.
I'm moving the motion as recommended, and if there are amendments to that, then I'd let that process unfold.
Councillor Napper.
Thank you once again, Warden McDougall. Just a comment on Mayor Bradley's thing there. Perhaps if they were brought up to those standards, you'd get a better, people take more pride in what they live in. My next question was going to be, and I don't know if it's appropriate this time, but if you're doing major renovations, if there's something, I would hope that you would certainly look at making the doorways wider and making them handicap accessible, because I think there's going to be a larger market in that housing, and if you're going to be doing the work anyway, it's cost effective to do it at that time and have a move towards there, just to even there, people with wheelchairs or handicaps can live in them, and because I think it'd be cost effective if you could keep that in mind.
Ms. Rushorn?
More and more we are encountering issues in terms of individuals with mobility barriers, and certainly the issue even of scooters, just as you indicate, becoming larger as that facilitates mobility throughout the community. So certainly we are looking at in 2016 a plan to address that type of thing, but it would be, if we can incorporate it into this, we would certainly do so, but we will need to look at some of those issues.
Councillor McKenzie and then Councillor Cook.
Thanks, Madam Warden. My question is mainly for clarification, and through you to Ms. Rochorn. I guess the first question I have is the province that mandates the number of units that we have in the county, or the federal government?
Province under the Social Housing Act.
Excuse me, the province mandates it, but they give no money whatsoever. And then we have a federal grant that's decreasing down to zero over the next 10 years. And then basically it's the counties alone that will be paying for it. And I guess, would you know of any plan whatsoever what may happen as time goes on? Is the province got any plans to increase the numbers that they're looking at, just strictly on the population in Lambton County?
Ms. Rushorn?
This was part of the downloading originally when social housing came to the county, and so it would have come with maintaining a certain number of units as part of our standards, and so then that became the county's responsibility. The province does fund, but it funds the investment in affordable housing, and we can't use the money for our existing housing stock, so that's one of the issues there. The federal government has indicated, as Councillor Gillis alluded to, that they are looking at a social investment. That social investment that they talk about is, yes, in social housing, but it's also in childcare and in a number of other areas. So how much would be dedicated to this? How much would be addressing the issue of the federal transfer payments versus new money? We have no idea at this point.
Thank you. Councillor Cook?
Thank you, Madam Warden. Through to Margaret. Just I know this is based on a 10-year funding program that's decreasing from the government. Has there been any consideration given to either 12 to 15 years funding on this program to take it out a little bit longer, just so it would mitigate the cost of upfront costs right now?
Ms. Rushhorn?
We actually had a 20-year capital plan, but we brought 10 years.
Okay, Council, we've had a good discussion. I'm going to remind you that there's a motion on the floor, and I'm going to call the vote. All in favor of the motion as brought forward? Opposed? One. That motion is carried. Before we leave this area, I believe that I need to refer Council to page 40 of your package, whereby there was subsequent direction as to how we are going to achieve this goal of $4 million a year over the next 10 years. So there's a recommendation on page 40 of 71 with respect to the how-to of achieving this repair. Councillor Bradley? Yes, moved by Councillor Bradley. Seconder? Councillor Bruzewitz, discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, moving on to information reports then. Under the Social Services Division, item B on pages 41 to 52. Council's wish, please. Councillor McKenzie? Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Case, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That motion is carried. Finance, Facilities and Court Services Division, there is a notice of report to the Standing Committee, item A. Mr. Ennis.
Thank you, Madam Warren. This was just basically to make sure that there was an opportunity, if somebody wanted to ask questions about that report that is going to the committee PM, that you could do so at this time. Based on our analysis of where each individual departmental or program budget is going, we currently predict that we are going to be approximately $250,000 to the good at the end of this year. This is only the second time in the past 15 years that I remember us at this point in time being able to predict a surplus. And again, what I want to stress is the fact that even though individual budgets show pluses and minuses on this one, the key that we do as your staff is to work together and make sure that we're always aware of where people are experiencing pressures on their budget, to make sure that if we can provide a mitigating and an offset to that we can do so as well. So it is good news for you. It means that we are going to be coming with a report that will discuss how those monies can be used towards the benefit of ratepayers early next year.
Thank you, Mr. Ennis. We don't need anything? No. Okay. All right. Item B, information report on the budget preparation timelines and an information report with respect to that. Council, do we need to receive and file on that? Yes. Motion to receive. Councillor Napper, seconded by Councillor Weber. Any discussion? Councillor McKenzie.
Yeah, one question I have when I looked at this, any requests for donations, is that booked for before the budget day this time rather than during the budget day?
Mr. Ennis?
Thank you, Madam Warden. We always ask people to have their, when we get aware of requests, we have sent out letters already this year to people that we know who are looking for funds. We've asked them to have the information to us by no later than the third week of January so that we can build those into the draft budget and present them to you at that time. We always try to have it happen before the budget day, but the direction from council has always been never to say no to somebody. And if somebody comes, at the 11th hour we will try and get them to be able to present at that time. We realize that it doesn't leave a lot of time for discussion, but we also believe that if we can, respect the notification deadlines and get the information to you before, that we do so or on that day. So we do try and get them earlier, but again, sometimes people come late, and we do not feel it appropriate to turn them away. But we do try, Councillor.
Questions? Seeing none. All in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Item B is another report. Does staff wish to speak to that? No? Thank you. Council, your wish in that report. Councillor McKenzie? Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Marriott? All in favor? Thank you. That motion is carried. We have reports requiring a motion. Item A, regarding the Treasurer's statutory report on funding in non-cash expenditures included in the 2016 budget. Their recommendation is across pages 63 and 64. Councillor Case? Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Weber. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Okay. Item 11. Core Services Report. With respect to a motion 10 of the Lambton County Council minutes dated July 8th. That report is on pages 65 to 69. Councillor Bradley?
Just receive and file the report.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor McCharles? Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Item B, regarding the attrition management update. Council's wish with that one. Councillor Bradley?
I have a concern about the nature of the reporting, and I think I've raised this before. It gives, I think, a somewhat false picture of the elimination of 62 positions, but a significant number of them were provincially paid positions. What I'd like to see as a complement to this is what was the impact levy of the positions. I mean, that to me is what really this is about, is if you reduce 5 positions, what's the impact on the levy? And if you look at particularly because the daycare elimination has really inflated the number, but what was the actual impact on the county by the elimination of those positions? If that's possible, Mr. Innes, without a lot of challenge?
Mr. Innes?
Thank you. Yes, we can augment that report going forward on that one. What we can do is we can talk about the direct impact on the budget, and in the case of those daycare positions, what I would remind Council that one of the reasons behind their elimination was that if they had not been, the cost of those was going to transfer to the levy. So there were real cost implications to the county as well, but we will make sure that that's clarified going forward.
Yes, and I recognize that. So what I suggest from here on forward, I'm not asking you to backtrack to come back and justify that or explain it, just for the future.
Thank you. All in favor of that? Oh, sorry. Oh, it was moved by Councillor Bradley, seconded by Councillor McKenzie. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried with an amendment to how we report in the future. Thank you. Notice of bylaws. Mr. Cribbs. Oh, sorry. Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Your Worship. There is a confirming bylaw before County Council today, and specifically a motion moved by Councillor Bushy, seconded by, where did I go? By Councillor Broad, that bylaw number 35 of 2015 as circulated be taken as read a first and second time.
All in favor? That is carried.
Warden, there's also a motion moved by Councillor Mackenzie, second by Councillor Marriott, that bylaw number 35 of 2015 as circulated be taken as read a third time and finally passed.
All in favor? That motion is carried. Other business, please, before a motion to adjourn. Councillor Bradley.
I'm just serving notice of motion that for the next meeting that looking for staff to come back with a new process on the CAO review.
Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Madam Warden. Victim Services of Sarnia Lambton is celebrating their 25th anniversary Thursday night at the Best Western in Point Edward. This organization works closely with the Sarnia Police Department and the Lambton County OPP, providing emotional and practical support to victims of crime and tragic circumstances 24/7, 365 days per year to all corners of Lambton County. As a previous long-term board member, then a 10-year crisis responder, I've seen firsthand the positive impact that these well-trained volunteers have in these stressful situations, and I want to thank the County of Lambton for recognizing this milestone achievement for this vital organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. Is there any other business? Motion to adjourn. Councillor Napper, seconded by Councillor Broad. All in favor? That's carried.